This is a reading from the Autobiography of Maria Valtorta, and this is a continuation of her experiences at boarding school. We rose at 6 a.m. on weekdays and at 7 on Sundays and holidays. At 6:30 or 7:30 we were in church for Holy Mass and prayers. At 7:45 there was breakfast, brief recreation, study of the lessons while strolling under the porticos or in the immense hall of the theater in the cold months. At 8:45 the hour-long classes began. At noon, lunch. From 1 p.m. to 1:45, recreation. Then each of us continued with her own occupations involving work, study, music, painting, and so forth until 4 p.m. At 4, a snack and recreation. Then homework and lessons until 6:30. Evening prayers in church and the Eucharistic benediction during novenas or in the months of May and June. Dinner at 7 p.m. Recreation from 7:30 to 8:30. Then, after the singing of Sub Tuum Praesidium before Mary Immaculate, the younger girls went to bed, and the older ones stayed up until 9:30, and even later in exam periods, and then to sleep. On Thursday and Sunday there was a walk through the city or to the park, according to the season. In the summer, every evening there was a stroll in the countryside amidst the fields filled with golden ears. During carnival, cinema, and performances. Completely indoors were performances at other schools that invited us to their cultural events, and concerts at the Milan Conservatory or other halls. In the spring, prize trips to Brianza and the lakes. From July 10th to October 10th, vacations at home. Excellent, plentiful food, regular medical attention, central heating, joy, beauty, refinement, and goodness. I was just fine there. I was at the boarding school from March 4th, 1909 to February 23rd, 1913. 5 school years and 4 solar years. Solar not only because they lasted 365 days, but because of the truly solar happiness of that time. My classmates, all well loved in their families and many even spoilt, found that discipline quite severe and complained about it. I found that I had never felt discipline so little as I did there. I liked study, and it was beautiful to study there, for praise was a continual stimulus for those willing. I studied then, with joy and merit, and was always up to date. Order and obedience did not weigh me down, nor did good manners. I was always cited, therefore, as a model. In 5 years, I was never punished. I told you that from a very young age I acted correctly out of pride, so as not to have anything to apologize for. Secondly, I behaved well to content father and avoid mother's punishments. But there, at my boarding school, I studied well and was a perfect student. I must say so, for it is true, and I do not fear denials. Sisters are still alive and can confirm my assertion, exclusively out of love. I had noted that the sisters, these virgin mothers, truly rejoiced when the schoolgirls responded to their care, whereas they grew sad and suffered when, in spite of all their loving efforts, a girl remained indolent, undisciplined, and rebellious. I never wanted to sadden my sisters, who loved me as my mother had not loved me, and whom I loved with a gratitude which after 30 years of separation has not grown languid. Sister Rose, the assistant superior for studies, would say, "Those students, the superiors, have a great deal to complain about the superiors." It is a genuine truth. I, who always did my duty, have no reason to complain about my superiors, just as they have no reason to complain about me, and they show me so in every way. My classmates, too, loved me, and still love me. I always got on well with everyone, and even if I did not like certain obsessions of theirs and little acts of pride and selfishness, I always made allowances for them, trying to bring them to reason patiently, so as to modify tendencies which were natural in them as rich, happy girls. I was rich, but not happy. I knew the savor of weeping, and life thus offered me lights different from theirs. How many confidences, little secrets, and secret aid I gave to these sisters of my soul. By nature I possessed the difficult quality of silence. I knew how to listen, console, and keep silent. The boarding school is a little world. There is a bit of everything, all social classes, all characters, all contingencies, our own sorrows, joys, and hopes, and those reflected in us from life outside. Everything is common in that little society. The pain striking one is shared by the others. Deaths in the family, misfortunes, and disasters affecting one girl make all cry. Joyful occasions, births, marriages, causing one to rejoice, bring gladness to the others. And the sisters as well have their affections and their crosses, intimate ones in the community, and external ones related to their homes, abandoned out of love for Jesus. Who are the fools who say habit extinguishes affections? I have seen my sisters suffer intensely in certain hours of torment in front of me, of whose understanding and prudence they were sure. My sisters cried many tears. Sometimes they would take refuge in my little room for study, for I had a room all my own, for motives I shall state further on. And there they let their hearts overflow. Poor dear sisters, I would let them weep, listen to what they told me, intuit what they did not say, pray that Jesus would console them, and for my own part, give them my love. They would leave in better spirits. I too would confide in them, only a little, for I was very reserved, shy, and modest about my feelings. But the fact is we understood each other, even without very many words. My glance, the eagerness on my face, and the trembling of my voice said what I was ashamed to say. I was loved very much. A natural correctness in judgment made it hard for my reflections to be mistaken. My superior always told Mother, Maria is a very sensible young lady. Nothing escapes her, and even we sisters must watch out, for if we err, she very politely points it out to us, and I must agree that she's really right. My classmates also adored me and were proud of me on account of my intelligence, much prouder than I was, for I felt I could not boast of this gift of God, but should only praise him for it and use it for the benefit of my fellow students. All the letters to prelates and authorities, all the literary essays to be read at academies, and all the compositions imitating styles came out of this head of mine. I felt like a silkworm spinning and spinning its sticky secret, and weaving its masterpiece, without merit and without fatigue. But this is all the human side. I am sorry to waste time talking about it, for the additional reason that I must state the good and the bad about myself. But you beg me to tell you the good and the bad, and I do. But I shall now go into a subject which you will like better and which I prefer. First, though, I'll tell you what I studied. The first and second years were internal education. For the third, after my father's illness in the spring of 1910, my mother, who was then absolute mistress of everything, as there was not even the shadow of a will on the part of my dad, imposed her will, which is not to be discussed, and I had to do technical studies. Mother wanted the subsidiary subjects and then teacher training set on her ideal of the daughter teacher, but the sisters pointed out that I would have to leave boarding school and attend public schools as a private student, and, in addition, since I was completely inept in drawing, I could not attend normal school. My mother then opted for the technical. Nothing could be worse. Remember that my mathematical capacity had come to a standstill at fractions. Like a stubborn mule, my brain had refused to go on with calculation. I understood nothing. Arithmetic, geometry, and bookkeeping were a sterile torture. I came to feel ill from the effort to understand, but I grasped nothing. They seemed to be speaking in Japanese, African, Eskimo. Ask yourself if it was appropriate to talk of technical subjects. After all, I had no need of a job. But if what was really sought was to place a piece of paper, a diploma, in my hand, it should at least have been in classical studies, where I managed quite well. I begged and entreated in this regard. The sisters begged and entreated. There was nothing to be done. My mother, faithful to her, my mind is made up, was inexorable. In a year I did the 3 technical subjects and failed badly in my mathematics, geometry, and bookkeeping exams. Maximum grades in everything else. I wasted away to the point of getting ill. I had destroyed myself with tears and aimless toil. As always, my mother had placed herself athwart my life and ruined me, and she has ruined me, and she spoiled a piece of my happy existence as a schoolgirl, heaven knows. When, feeling quite ill, I went back to boarding school for the October exam, the sisters managed to have me do the entire classical program during the remaining months of education, and they succeeded. But what good did it do me? What was the use of that poor diploma marred by low grades in the 3 exact subjects? And what was the use of such exhausting study whereby in less than 20 months I went through the whole junior and senior high school curriculum. I had some inner satisfactions, but no benefit. And so, well, and always well. That is why for the last 2 school years I had a room to myself for study, where I worked and worked and worked 12 hours a day. On the other hand, they were hours of joy, for I dearly loved the literary subjects. And now we shall speak of the Spirit, of the life of the Spirit, of which only he who has certain faith in Christ is sure. At my boarding school, like a flower in a propitious flower bed, like a plant taken from the shade into the sun, like a shrub which has grown wild and feels the gardener's hand upon it, I blossomed in height, intelligence, and knowledge, but above all, I blossomed in Christ. As I told you at the beginning of this narration, the first encounter took place while I was still a child in the Ursulines' chapel, where, with all the innocent confidence of girlhood, I loved Jesus, who for my sake had died in such pain. Afterwards, I had lost sight of my God. The contact had been severed, just like a wire that breaks under the excessive weight of useless things. The adorers of the Most Holy Sacrament had joined the 2 extremes of the broken wire, but certainly as a result of my incapacity, the current had not been established. Too many years of spiritual inertia had elapsed, and my soul had fallen into a lethargy it found hard to come out of. Jesus did not force me. He could have given me a rough shake through some pain or anything else chosen by his will, but he did not do so. He waited. He only loved me, my dear Jesus. Now it is just for me to love him, even without feeling his caresses, for I was so apathetic, so dazed for so long that I did not feel his. After arriving at boarding school from the first days, I felt that my soul was turning to him again. The tree in springtime must not feel any different when emerging from its lethargic winter sleep. Up from the roots, buried in the soil, sap, which is nothing but a molecule of sun, descending into the sod, shortly before cold and now lukewarm with golden beams, rises through the bare trunk, sends a thrill through the rough bark, blood into the solid wood, life into the half-dead pith, pushes forward through the branches, towards the treetop, swells the gemme which have just been outlined, inflates and opens them in the miracle of a new leafy branch, scatters buds and corollas, enlivens the ovaries and makes them fruitful, provokes vegetable unions between flowers and flower, sets fertilizing pollen in motion, creates the triumph of early fruit, and makes the tree not long ago sad and skeleton-like, a wonder of useful, fecund life. I, too, felt something descend into me, melt the ice in my heart, and give me a movement, thrill, and light, where before there had been death and darkness. Saint Joseph, the one who, holding me on his fatherly knees, had been the first to wash me in the blood of Christ, now took me by the hand and led me to Jesus. I had barely been at school for 6 days when the beloved novena to Saint Joseph began, and I had been there for 15 when the solemn Mass took place in honor of the saint, who is also the saint of my superior. Christ's sun was rising over my night. I have always liked solemn liturgical functions very much. That display around the Holy of Holies, that sacred music, sweet and sublime, that aroma of incense being burned before the altar in fragrance and fire, and that praise of God and his saints, framed in splendor, have always touched my heart, and they have given me an infinitesimal measure of what is and forever and ever will be the eternal ceremony of Hosanna to the Lamb in the blessed heavens of God. And since then they have placed in me a yearning for the celestial hymns, a longing to go to heaven, to join my voice to those of the blessed hosts whose life is to adore the Holy Trinity and lose themselves in the joy of such worship. At my school, religion filled the whole day, but it was a luminous, open, confident religion, not long, exhausting prayers, but the constant, brief call to God, not trembling before his judgment, but trust in the goodness of the Father was inculcated in us. Religion was never imposed, but we were brought to desire it without even realizing. So pleasant was the practice of it, so sweet was the manner of the teachers who lived on that religion. Such great attraction did the pious life they had us live hold. The day began with Holy Mass, which was for everyone. But if anyone did not wish to receive Holy Communion, she was perfectly free not to. No one would question her or say anything in that regard. The sisters' behavior did not change in the face of the spiritual inertia of one of their daughters. They would certainly redouble their prayers for that drowsy soul, but said nothing to her directly. I think this is the best way, indeed, the only method to be followed in such a delicate matter as is the life of the soul. Prayer and penance to obtain light for souls that have grown dark, but no more than this. Religiosity is nothing but a life of love, and love, to be true, must be spontaneous. If imposed, they automatically cease to be love and become a heavy, unpleasant burden. It is necessary to know how to lead hearts to love without this industry's being manifest. My sisters excelled in this sublime art. They educated us in the life of faith so gently, with such light, nearly imperceptible touches, that we found ourselves permeated with religiosity without even realizing that continuous work in this sense was being done. Just as they did not force piety, so they did not spur us on to the exaltation of piety. Here as well they had a very upright guide, who limited herself to watching over the tendencies of our youthful souls without doing anything to arouse in us those ephemeral, mystical fevers proper to the age of puberty, which, after having taken hearts to a delirium of religious sentimentalism, afterwards leaves them to fall, like a fleeting blaze of straw, covered with ashes and cold for life, having consumed in an hour, and not in true love, but in a chimera of love, in a deceitful mirage, all the limited sense of piety of which they were capable, like certain plants forced by the gardener against nature, which develop precociously, cover themselves with an unnatural luxuriance of leafy branches and corollas appearing before their time, and then die. Poor ephemeral plants which man's caprice leads to a premature end, when on their own they could have brought joy for so many years. None of this occurred at my school. Faith was everywhere, the sun giving true life, but just as happens with the stars, which are always in the heavens, and under whose revolving man spends his days and takes his rest without thinking of them, so we, too, lived, regulated by the sun of faith, but without considering that the good we felt growing in us came from that sun, penetrating us little by little, and becoming blood of our souls, flesh of our spirits. But precisely because it was like that slow, constant work, it has remained permanently in us. When the clouds open and water pelts down from them upon the earth, spread out to receive it like an enormous cloth, the reactions it produces are varied. An alluvial downpour strikes, flattens, uproots, and removes branches, fruits, steels, and seeds. A yellowish, muddy rain is left as a memorial to the meteorological fury. But if a soft drizzle, practically April dew, slowly descends from the barely misty sky, cleansing the leafy branches of dust, swelling buds and ovaries, falling upon the sod like a caress, filtering down to the hidden seeds to nurse them with gases snatched from the air, with astonished eyes of joy, man sees the earth, become more beautiful and fertile, and teem with life from all its pores, which exude steels and crowns themselves, with flowers that in a clearer and purer atmosphere offer the hope of the harvest close at hand. Religion at my school was gentle water, penetrating to the very depth, bringing with it healthy juices of life. The reactions of souls were different, as the souls themselves were different. Some of us ascended quite far into the supernatural. Others remained as they were, and still others were wretchedly ruined. But these uneven results were due to individual and family factors, for the work of education by the sisters was the same for and upon all of us. Probably because it was not very happy, I yielded to grace with greater ease. It should not be like that, should it? One would say that those whom God's goodness preserves from pain ought to be the happiest, loving Him and clinging to Him with gratitude and affection. In reality, however, the opposite usually takes place. I am referring only to hearts that are not utterly wicked, for in that case, good and evil, joy and pain, leave the same sacrilegious indifference to the giver of all things, when they do not drive people outright to an even more sacrilegious rebellion. But in hearts that are not perfectly wicked, pain is a bell reminding the soul of God. In hearts lacking affection, it is a benefactor giving the bread of love in the name of God. in beings who are alone, in a life which does not love them, more than for a creature lost in the desert, it is an encounter with the only one who does not betray, disenchant, or abandon. Those who weep are those who know not only how to understand other hearts, but also how to find the heart of hearts, on which to lay the sorrowful brow, the bleeding heart, on which to shed the tears that overwhelm and blind us, on which to place our love that no one wants and that still asks to be donated so as not to become a harsh, prostrating torture. Maria, the little Maria who had wept already so, and wept alone, who had already loved so and loved alone in the luminous spring of 1909, while wandering lost in a new little world, heard a voice sound in her heart and called her, Maria. And little Maria, lifting her youthful eyes, already excessively serious on account of the abundant pain they had to absorb, encountered a very sweet face turned towards her with love and compassion. But Maria did not recognize him immediately. She only felt attracted by the one who gazed at her with such love and stretched out his hands, anxious to caress her, and she smiled at him. Then light was shed, and Maria knew, recognized Jesus, the Master, and prostrated herself at his feet with a desire for love. But the Master, who knew that little Maria would have to love him in complete knowledge after so many, many misfortunes, said to her, as he had formerly said to Mary Magdalene on that radiant April morning, Don't touch me. You must still accomplish a great deal first. Not I, but you must first ascend on the cross and place yourself as a host on the altar of pain. Offer yourself to the justice of the Father. Drink my chalice to the dregs. Become familiar with the different faces of temptation, passion, and love. Choose what is best, and renounce what is vain illusion. You must first disappear with your current personality and be reborn with a new soul. You must first pronounce your fiat, your ecce ancilla, and with all the pain which is the desire of the children of Eve, conceive me, generate me, and nourish me with yourself. When you have made yourself into a tabernacle to shelter my humanity, tortured out of love for all of you, when you have rendered yourself a victim, a lesser host, then you shall touch me. Then I will be in you and you in me, in a bond of love which will make you blessed even on earth, even on the cross. For I will be your strength, your joy, your all. For now I will simply be the master, for you shall have no other master but me, as no other can instruct you in the difficult way along which I wish to lead you to my kingdom, the way of pain, so that you will know, O soul, that I prefer that only with the word and face of pain will I come to you to take you to joy. My sweet Jesus spoke in this way in his soundless voice to my soul, which found him and recognized him in that lovely spring, and my soul, with greater capacity for thought than that possessed in blessed girlhood, set about following the Master, from whom she observed every good would come to her in her life, humanly bereft of every good. From then on I knew the joy of the heart, which is the companion of those who make God the center of their affections and the aim of their existence, that profound peace which exists and resists, even if the surface of our self is disturbed by the waves of a tempest, that sweetness which tempers the bitterness of the darkest hours and provides the strength to go on, bordering it, is true, on despair, but managing to overcome it on the way of the cross, and therefore of God. How I loved Jesus in my early youth, and how he loved me. I do not know whether the inner fire of my heart cast outward flares, making its existence known to my sisters. I was so reserved and knew how to watch over my truest and most secret life so attentively that I doubt it, at least at the start. I believe my mystical betrothal to Christ was unknown to all, but it was well known to me. It was not an overlooked natural love, like certain loves of which we only become aware only if we are left without them. Ah, no, I knew I loved him, and knew I wanted to love him more and more. This love was full of knowledge, clearly delineated in all its details. It gave me inward singing and inward weeping for love. It gave me lights and counsels. It gave me activity and willingness, and the deep, deep longing to love him more and more, and ever more perfectly, profoundly, and completely. Here's a picture of the Bianconi School of Monza in Maria Valtorta's student days. The dining room above and the work school below. On the next page, it shows the Bianconi School of Monza in Maria Valtorta student days, the dormitory above, and the gymnasium below. I think I missed showing a picture yesterday. It was this one. The Bianconi School of Monza in Maria Valtorta's student days, the reception room above and the theater hall below. Okay. And Jesus instructed me with paternal sweetness. That's right, Jesus himself. I did not become his little Maria host through a human word, though holy words have been addressed to me from the altar. It was Jesus who instructed me, calling me sweetly in the hours in which he wanted the spiritual hearing of his little Maria to be closely attuned to words of life, which would later illuminate with divine light in me. I remember what a gentle tempest of love certain special lives of saints stirred up in me. It was the custom at the school to offer readings in the refectory in particular periods, such as Advent and Lent. One of the older sisters, or a sister would ascend to a kind of pulpit located at the center of the very long dining hall, and for a quarter of an hour at noon and a quarter of an hour in the evening, they would read pages of the lives of saints. The first one I heard was the story of a soul. At that time, St. Teresa of the Child Jesus, who had died only 11 years before, was simply Sister Teresa. But for me, she was immediately the friend. Her doctrine of confident abandon, of generous love, her little great way of holiness imposed themselves upon me at once. I understood that along the same way I should walk to reach Jesus. You will see, Father, that I was not mistaken, and that many years later the sweet little saint was my godmother when I gave myself as a host to Jesus. Then there were the women martyrs. At work school as well, one would read above all to keep my restless and talkative companions calm and quiet. Very often that one was me, for I read well and with good pronunciation. Fabiola, the last Vestal Virgin, Ben-Hur, Under the Sign of Rome, and I don't know how many more books on the early times of Christianity were thus read or heard by me. How many friends I then had among the purple and white ranks of the virgin martyrs! How many friends among the holy tribunes, the holy deacons, the humble slaves and plebeians in the Rome of the catacombs! One always receives from the good Jesus what one asks for with purity of intention, and when spurred by love. It seems to us at times that this is not so, that God does not pay attention, but he only makes us wait. Prayer offered with sincerity and for what will certainly be good for us is always heard by God. Repeating thousands of times the prayer of Agnes, I ask that my body and my heart be kept pure, so they would not be confounded in the presence of God. I asked 1,000 times that it be granted me to love him through the confession of martyrdom, because I could no longer separate myself from this lover, to whom I was bound by such a sweet knot of charity. Have I not received what I asked for? Yes, I have, and completely. If the necessities of illness have made the white corolla of virginal purity bow down, is this not, on the other hand, a martyr's purple robe, extending even more radiantly over all the sufferings of the flesh? For it is a martyrdom of the heart which sees the inviolate freshness of the Virgin's lily being torn. If in lovely paradise I shall not be among the 144,000 who follow the Lamb, footnote 1, Revelations chapter 14, verses 1 through 5, the white host of those whose flesh has not known profanation of any kind, to make up for it, will I not be among the blood-reddened ranks of those whom a very lofty and comprehensive love has spurred along the way of immolation, which is bloody, though in appearance it is not blood-soaked, but only marked by the crushing of all man's truest riches, the first of which is health, life, If people not very convinced about the fundamental truths of our religion knew that I, a poor feminine creature at the dawn of life, when the experience of this life has not yet made known to us what immolation is, offered myself, they would say I was brainless, mad. No, Lord, your little violet love was neither brainless nor mad, and not self-conceited either. The little violet born in Lent, the little violet that became beaded with her first tears of love for you in the presence of your wounded face, the little violet that, having grown in shadow and darkness, in cold and solitude, yearned for your Son, your love, to raise her up her gloomy head and smile at your cross, knew that you would not disappoint her wish, and would help her in suffering for you. You had need of the Cyrenean to carry your cross, but for your little Christs who go up to their Calvary, carrying their cross out of love for you, out of love for their sisters and brothers, to complete and continue your passion, it is you who becomes the Cyrenean. And when the creature staggers and falls because of human frailty, and suffering excessively can no longer manage to drag the cross, you take his place, and subject your divine shoulders to the weight of the wood, for you have mercy on the little hosts. You have a jealous love for them, a holy longing to lift them up with you to the summit between earth and heaven. Living altars and living thuribles on whom the Father's eyes look down benignly, and from whom issue rivulets of graces upon their fellow men who pass by unaware.